Carl and Liam here from Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for sure. And as the 18th episode of season 3 of the Goosebumps TV series and the 62nd episode overall, Say Cheese and Die. Again, the sequel to Say Cheese and Die, which was a very good adaptation of a good story, done pretty well in TV show format. I say that because it's very important to note that this is the complete opposite. This is a waste of time, is pretty boring and rubbish all the way through. So much so that one of the interesting facts about this is that Ron Oliver, who is the director of this one, said in the TV companion for Goosebumps that the network had them adapt the book because the first episode was a ratings hit. However, Ron thought the episode didn't work no matter how much they tried to recut it, and it didn't satisfy anyone. So there you go.
Yeah, I can understand his opinion on that, and but you're letting out your opinion already on how you felt about the episode. It's almost, what's the point of talking through it now? You told
because
everybody
we talk through the plot points, and then we break them down a little bit more. It is, of course, the 44th book in the original Goosebumps series, and the second book in the Say Cheese and Die saga. Directed by Ron Oliver, as I said, but also written by Dan Angela and Billy Brown, pre the issues that arose with, I can't even remember what the episode was now. The one with werewolf skin. That, yeah. Character-wise, actors, we've got Patrick Thomas as Greg Banks, Louis Del Grande as Mr. Sauer, Janine Levesque as Shari Walker, Paula Barrett as Mrs. Banks, and Christopher Redman as Terry Banks. Those are the major on-screen characters, so they're the ones I'm mentioning. And obviously, if you know your cast, you'll notice that the actors and the actresses are completely different from the ones who played the characters from the previous episode. Even hilariously notable, because this episode uses flashbacks. And obviously it flashes back to the original characters, actors, and then back to like the ones we've got now. Obviously, in the case of, say, Greg, you can kind of understand why the casting was different, as that was originally Ryan Gosling. And I don't know if by this point he was a star or he was, you know, important, but, you know, it is like, okay, it's not a massive surprise.
Yeah, but because, like you said, it's Ryan Gosling, immediately when you see it's not him, it's kind of like glaring straight away. But I thought that the kid that replaced him does a decent job, regardless of that anyway.
I have no problem with any of the acting in this. They're working with a pretty rushed and hurried story. There's not a lot that can be done. And like by the sound of it, it was cut quite heavily and cut up, hence why it feels so disjointed.
Definitely.
Only other facts really is that Greg, Patrick Thomas, would wear a fat suit and prosthetic makeup when Greg becomes fully obese. Quite notable, the difference between some CGI effects and some interesting other effects at the halfway point to the eventual full prosthetic make-up. And the music shares similarities, if you hear it, to Friday the 13th, the Friday the 13th theme, except you can hear the audible words of Say Cheese in this. The first, we will point out now, I think we'll actually make this known. We're having to re-record this episode because we lost the file of the original. So this, while I wrote this fact originally after I had done Say Cheese and Die again, watching it back now, and now knowing that, I was a lot more like, oh yeah, of course it is. Didn't really, you know, didn't pick up on it till now.
Yeah, now you saying it, the whole like say cheese thing that he did do, like a whispery. Yeah, I can see that now. That's quite an interesting thing to put in there.
It is indeed. But we begin seeing Greg sleeping in his bed late at night. We see his window slide open and a cloaked figure rises at the end of his bed and pulls out the evil camera, which is the exact same prop from the first one. At least he didn't screw that up. That is literally the same prop. It speaks, and it's supposed to be Spidey, the character, the creator of the camera from the first, but he kind of looks like death now. And we see Greg sitting up in bed screaming and begging for Spidey to not take his picture. Spidey tells Greg to say cheese, takes his picture, and we fade to black. This is a solid opening. This is perfectly fine. I think if you're of a certain age, the look of the Spidey skull would be quite scary.
Yeah.
Want to play with the camera? Here, let me show you how it's done. Say cheese.
The only thing is, it's pretty obvious it's a dream. Like, you immediately know, oh, well, that's a dream.
Well, it is Goosebumps after all.
It is Goosebumps after all, indeed. And he wakes up in bed, wrapped up in his duvet as his mother comes in to check on him. It was a bad dream, as we said, and he's clearly still being haunted by the effects of the original story. which is a really, really important point to hear, because the rest of the episode will drop that completely, as if he doesn't have some trauma at all.
Yeah, his actions don't reflect his apparent PTSD.
Exactly. Getting a good grade at school is way more important, apparently, than dealing with his trauma. But yeah. And which brings us to school. The next day, Greg's report is being graded by his teacher, Mr. Sao, and he needs an A. The problem is that his story, the assignment, was supposed to be a true story about life and all that. He's given it an F because Greg's story is about the camera, the events of the first book. And like, he's not young enough to be this stupid. He's not young enough to be this stupid. Especially as he insists it's true, and we get a brief flashback of some of the events that occurred. Mr. So says, hey, all right then. If it's true, prove it. Prove this is true and bring that camera here. I'm like, all right, yeah, fair enough. Apparently stuck, Greg goes back to Spidey's workshop and finds it completely gone. Apparently the building has been torn down, which is really, really nice. It's a way to get around the set not being there, the available building not being there, which likely, if you think back to how it looked in the first one, it may have been disused buildings ready to be torn down.
Yeah.
So for some reason, though, I noticed here, I noticed at the first watch, and I've noticed it again, and it drives me crazy. Greg keeps calling Spidey Spider. I do not understand this.
I actually think this is why I've always made that mistake myself. I think it's because of this episode, because I always think Spider in my head. And I think it's because of this, even though it's obviously, yeah, Spidey. But I don't know, like you said, why he would make that mistake. I have no idea.
No idea at all, as he narrates over a flashback. But Greg does find the basement. It still exists, as he kind of falls into it, literally, and makes his way down after a bat scare to find it completely abandoned. So you get bats fluttering out of the hole that was blocked up, I guess.
Classic Goosebumps.
Classic Goosebumps. He looks around, finds another door. We get another bat scare, which I wasn't okay with. The fact we get a second direct bat scare is like, oh, come on, guys, really?
And you're saying they tried really hard to edit this episode and they still left in a double bat scare.
Yeah, because I'd say another really weird period of editing is how he discovers the camera. Basically, it's almost like a slapstick trap style thing where he knocks a beam, which smashes a window, which then reveals the camera sitting on a dusty desk. Except it wasn't like that room was hidden or that door was closed, because he just walks in directly afterwards. It's a bit like, why did we go through this elaborate knock a beam down, smash the window, and he's like, oh, there's the camera.
I was getting like a sort of Jumanji vibe or something where it almost wants to be found, that sort of thing. But they don't really like play up on that too much at any other point. So, you know.
That would have been a cool idea. Like, and the way they could have done it, as you say, was have the room be hidden now, like, you know, behind a wall, a false wall or something. But he gets the camera, picks it up. A security guard arrives, notable for his spectacular look. Looks like a proper goon, and demands the camera from Greg. Greg, though, is being a dick now, takes his picture, even though he knows what that camera is capable of, takes his picture and runs up the stairs. The guard gives chase, but the stairs collapse and he falls down her. And then we sort of see the Polaroid Greg took of him. It lands on his chest, and we see in the Polaroid that the guard was going to fall off the stairs.
This is just the first of Greg's dick moves in the episode. He doesn't even look back at what he's potentially done there, like you said, knowing what the camera's capable of doing, like we saw in the first episode. He could have literally killed that guy, and he just doesn't care. He just wants the camera, wants that that grade, A or whatever he's hoping to get on his project.
And you might be wondering, why is the grade so important beyond the fact that he's a kid and it's school and all that? Well, we find out is when he gets home, he's accosted by his mother, and she reminds him that he needs a good grade because if he doesn't get one, he'll miss out on summer camp. And that's there. You're like, well, okay, then. It's all for selfish reasons.
This is a Goosebumps. In Goosebumps, kids are supposed to not want to go to summer camp, so this is completely opposite to the other kids. Also, am I mistakenly remembering that Spidey is supposed to be trapped inside the camera? No, he was free. wasn't he freed at the end of the last episode? He got free.
Yep.
Yeah. Even though he doesn't appear in this episode at all, so it's just irrelevant, right?
That is literally the ending of Say Cheese and Die. He's trapped in the camera, but then the two bullies or Mina kids find their way down there and end up taking a picture. And the last shot on Say Cheese and Die is Spidey rising up behind them, and that's how it ended. So yeah, that's the stakes. But he also bangs into Terry on his way out, who is late for work. We're wondering why that scene exists. That's just because Terry will become an important player in the later part of the story. So we needed to establish A, that Terry exists, but also that he has a job. In his room, Greg holds the camera up, but is startled by a noise at a window. It's Branches! Branches at the window. Always a scary one. He puts the camera away, locks it with a key, putting it under his pillow, then goes to sleep. The next day, he's walking down the street, for some reason struggling to put the camera in his bag. For some reason, he didn't do this at home. He didn't put it in his bag at home or anything. Now he's trying to do it while walking. And, you know, it's not a traditional camera. It's quite big.
I've got it. Greg's a moron.
Yes, it's that. A shadow and an ominous laugh creeps up at him, but when he turns around, he hears the echo of Spidey saying, "Say cheese," which is what we get in this, and no one is there. Shari then jump scares him, and she is angry to see the camera. Naturally, she's not happy to see it.
That's justified.
Indeed it is. And they argue about him taking the camera, and she tries to take the camera from him. And in the struggle, it goes off, and he takes her picture. Oh, what do we see? Her picture is a negative. And they kind of go, oh, it must be broken and so on. Instead of being like, okay, it probably means something. They just kind of laugh it up as being broken. But she then takes his picture and laughs when it shows him fat. And I'm like, man, oh man, they are so nonchalant about this. This is unacceptable.
Bloody kids.
No, I'm fat. It's not funny. You think this is a big joke? Big? Yes, it is a big joke.
That night, Greg is looking at his picture and then checks his body in the mirror, and he goes to bed confident everything will be okay. And it won't be, because in the morning, he wakes up to find himself much larger, comically larger, as he rips through his clothes that are too small for him now. And yeah, because we have not reached fat suit stage here, so they're trying to do some camera trickery with some imagery. But I'll let you, because you were the one that kind of brought this up last time. I think I'll let you bring it again. There's something really bad about this look.
Oh yeah. What did I say? What it was? Oh yeah, that's right. It's funny because Greg, he's trying to talk a lot, but you can tell they haven't moved on to the actual prosthetic. So it's like he's got something between his cheeks, maybe like some cotton balls or something. So as I said, credit to the actor, because he's having to deal with the fact that he's probably got something in his mouth, trying to deliver his lines, and you can tell he's kind of struggling. So yeah, that's quite amusing.
Yeah, they've gone for this batshit look, which is, as you say, it's like two balls of cotton wool in his cheeks, and it just looks really fucking stupid.
Yeah, it does.
No! No! No!
Yes, Shari then calls as Greg has to stop his mother literally trying to force her way in his room. He's literally pushing up against the door. She's pushing on the other side. It's like, whoa, mum, boundaries. Shari tries to tell him something, but because of what's going on, he hangs up. And then we get a comedy scene of Greg trying to fit in his clothes. I was undecided whether or not this could be offensive, fatphobic, or anything like that, particularly because of the music and all that. But to be honest, the episode's so light and so fluffy that I didn't really think there was that much in it.
Of course, I mean, whether or not if it came out today, you'll probably get accused of being fatphobic and things like that. But I think that the way it's done is clearly, like you said, quite light-hearted. It's not. They don't really make too many. I guess they make. It's obviously the butt of the joke is the fact that he's getting fat and stuff like that. Yep. But yeah, it's not really worth focusing on too much, I don't think.
Agreed. I will highlight one thing later on that I think's probably overstepping the mark, but we'll get to that. As he arrives at school and everyone laughs at Fatty Greg. Mr. Sauer accuses him of messing around because obviously Greg suddenly looks like this and refuses to listen to his excuses even though he actually sees the camera in his hand. Greg then sits down, breaks the chair, which sets all the class laughing again, and humiliated Greg runs out and goes home. This is not the point I'm referencing. This is just like, yeah, silly, that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, it's very, very silly.
Indeed, but this is the part where I think they overstep the mark, because later the doorbell rings and Greg goes to answer it, and he's so big that we see the water in the fishbowl shaking. Basically, it's the Jurassic Park footstep thing, and I was a bit like, well, was that a little bit, over the top? I don't know.
Yeah. Some people might take it that way. I suppose it's 50-50.
Indeed. Shari is here, and she's thin and gaunt. I didn't mind the makeup. I like what they've tried to do here. They've lit her in a way as well to make her look really dark shadows under her eyes and skin, and a little bit paler and stuff like that.
Sherry, you look so skinny. What happened to you?
I tried to tell you on the phone. Now I know why you wouldn't listen.
It's that camera.
No kidding. I eat and eat, but nothing seems to work. I weigh 10 less pounds than I did a few hours ago.
At this rate, I'm gonna explode, and you're gonna vanish.
Yeah, I do think it's worth highlighting that the fat suit effect itself actually does look pretty decent. And yeah, I liked the makeup that they used to make her look like she was unwell and slowly deteriorating. Thought it was effective.
Agreed. We also then see her physically lose weight and Greg gain it. It's not a badly done shot. It kind of just keeps it up close and sort of does it where sort of part of her clothing just shrinks, so it gets looser and his shrink a bit. Fingering, they have no other option. They decide to take each other's pictures again. But in Greg's one, he's even bigger. And you might be wondering, well, how are they going to resolve this situation in the laziest way possible? Because she starts to say, look, we just need to think positive about this, which for some reason gives Greg an idea of how to solve this. And it is a freaking stretch at best. And I don't know how I feel about it, because the way she's just like, oh, we just need to think positive, it just sort of feels so forced and shoehorned in. So what they do is they go to visit Terry at work, and Greg is now in his full fat suit. And the plan is to reverse the pictures, turn Greg's positive picture into a negative, and vice versa with Shari's. And I'm kind of like, look, sure, why the hell not? But it doesn't take much thought to break this down. The changing a picture into a negative, wouldn't that just, if it does reverse things, wouldn't it just mean that eventually Greg would get thinner and thinner and thinner, like Shari is doing? It wouldn't just stop when he gets back to his normal weight. You can say I'm overthinking it, and I am overthinking it for this episode, but it's such a cop-out idea that I don't know, I didn't like it.
Well, I agree. I didn't like it at all, even though, I try and see the logic in what they're thinking in terms of reversing and whatnot. But like you said, when you break it down, it doesn't make much sense. But I just wasn't a fan of it because it just ruins the idea of the killer camera. If anything it does, you can then reverse it. That just ruins the entire concept. If it can be undone so easily, then what's the point of it at all, really?
Agreed. Well, another major thing as well, and I think it probably bring it back up at the end, but is the camera is heavily neutered here compared to the first one. And we'll kind of get to that at the end, as basically Terry agrees to try, but they don't have much time. And they try to make this a tense scene where it looks like Greg and Shari are about to die. He's about to explode and she's about to disappear in the thin air, as it were, while Terry's desperately trying to get the pictures reversed. But of course, it works at the last minute and they return back to normal and everyone's happy.
It's too late. Too late.
Sherry! No!
But of course, that's not our resolution. It is the Goosebumps series. We need something more. So at school, Greg's new report, because he's still an idiot, his new report is now about the latest series events. So he rewrote his report, also did it about a story that no one would believe, and then submitted to his teacher, who, can you believe it, refuses to believe him. Even though the camera's there, he just accuses him of going to great lengths to get an A. And I agree with that to a point, but you would be like, listen, you've rewritten this a second time. The amount of effort you're putting in, could you just not write a good one, a real one?
True.
But he suggests, hey, Greg, use the camera. And Greg is against using it. So they end up struggling with it. And Mr. Saar's picture ends up being taken. And he looks at the picture, he kind of dismisses it, but then his hair begins to fall out as everyone laughs. And the picture we see reveals that he is now bald. And that is our wah, wah, wah ending of, say, Cheese and Die Again. And this is what I was talking about, neutering the camera. In the first one, the camera caused a car crash. The camera caused Spidey to be trapped inside it. The camera caused Shari to completely disappear. Here we have the camera making Greg fat, the camera making Thingy lose his hair, Mr. Sour lose his hair, and having the goon fall down some stairs a very small height. Oh, how evil. I like it. It just feels severely blunted.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, sequels I think should always take something to the next level, but this does the complete opposite. It kind of goes backwards.
Yeah.
And it's such a great idea, the killer camera, but I just think like in this kind of show where you can only go so far with the horror and what you could potentially do with the camera, it's like the possibilities are really great if you had maybe a higher rating and stuff like that, but they obviously knew it by that fact they got the kids show thing going on, so yeah, it's disappointing. And I think on the whole it's just an okay continuation, but just kind of further wastes the concept. I don't even think the first part is that great either. I mean, I know it had some popularity and it's obviously one of the more recognizable and iconic episodes of Goosebumps, but I think that's mainly because of the concept being so strong, but they've never really like tapped into using it really, really well. Yeah.
I think you're being too generous when you say it's an okay episode. I think it's below average. I think it's a waste of time. And it's also amongst a lot of episodes near the back end of season 3 that are really head-scratchingly poor or just bland or boring, and it fits amongst them. And it really shouldn't have done, because as you said, while the first one isn't a classic, it is one of the more memorable ones. And this had a really simple concept, like really simple idea. In fact, you probably could have written this and not followed the book and gone off with your own idea, and you could have had a wealth of ideas based on the fact the pictures could be anything you want them to be.
Definitely. I think one of the things that really hurt the sequel was the lack of Spidey, because I think we mentioned in our review of the original episode that his performance, the actor that plays Spidey, was one of the highlights. So not having him in there, and they obviously kind of wanted to have some sort of element with him having the whispering and stuff like that. But yeah, I kind of want to know what happened to Spidey. Well, I'd like to maybe know what he would get up to with the camera, kind of thing.
Agreed. And you know what? We now know this. There's no excuse to not have him, because the actor would return in a different role in a couple of episodes down the line. So he was clearly still available and still happy to work with Goosebumps.
It does raise the question also, because the final shot of the first part is Spidey escaping. So he obviously has the camera back at that point. So I wonder why he decided to abandon it in the building, considering his whole role in the first part was protecting the camera and keeping it. So why would he just leave it and like run away? But whatever.
Yes, whatever indeed. Look, that's our feelings on Say Cheese and Die Again. If you got any thoughts, are you a fan? Maybe you're a big fan of it. You know what to do. Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?